You're watching Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.
Hello, I'm Dr. William E. Morgan, president of Parker University, and this is Clinical Rounds. And I have a very special guest today, Dr. Dana Hollingsworth. Dana, welcome to Clinical Rounds.
Thank you for having me.
So we're going to have a little discussion about the adjustment and a little bit about the science of the adjustment, something that you're an expert in, and we'd like to share with our audience, something that's clinically relevant that'll affect them. And what we'd like to do is kind of look at some of the research studies that are out there and look at them, but also explain and discuss what do they mean. Now, the first study that we should look at is this study that talks about the friction, the interface between the skin and the thoracic spine. What is that study?
It's by Brzezinski, Ross, and McGill.
And it's called the...
We're looking at the frictional properties of the thoracic skin fascia interface and the implications in spine manipulation.
That's a mouthful.
So it is a mouthful. So what do we do with that in practice, right?
Yeah, exactly. So what do they find in this study?
So this is fascinating. If you all take your finger and you put it on your hand and you kind of push to feel the movement of your hand, you might notice that you're not really moving anything under your hand, right? Have you tried this?
Yeah.
I think you have, because you talked about this at Parker seminars. So
I have, yeah.
I stole your show there, sorry.
That's all right.
But for the longest time, we've said you need to tissue pull to get onto your contact. Did you learn that in school?
I certainly did.
We still teach that in school. You need a tissue pull to get on your contact, because you do, but why? And what is it doing, and what's the implication of that?
So I think you're going to talk about tissue pull versus preload.
So yeah, is there a difference, right? So the way that this study, if I remember correctly, this study was saying that the more force you add, it doesn't change how much friction is underneath your hand. So could we get the same result if we used maybe lighter, more? We need to think about how this impacts us. Does our line of drive get affected by the tissue pull or the preload that we use?
And the study, this is mainly about thoracic spine, but it really goes like when you think you're trying to twist a bone into place, or some of these techniques that talk about putting torque into it, it's not torquing the bone. I'm not torquing my carpals by twisting this. If I have an instrument that torques my C1, it's not going to torque my C1 vertebra.
It's torquing the skin.
It's torquing the skin.
Right, we see the change in the skin, but there's so much between the skin and the joint itself that to think that our force is actually changing the direction down at that joint, the research is not really supporting that like we thought it would.
I've been doing certain adjustments wrong for years. So, and it was interesting that essentially the friction, it's a frictionless interface between the skin and the bones, so that essentially there's less friction here than there is between two wet ice cubes rubbing against each other.
That's so crazy.
It is crazy.
Because ice cubes are slippery. Ever tried to hold a bunch of them?
I heard they are. So there's techniques that tell us to adjust along the facet lines. And that means you have to do, in the thoracic spine, for instance, we would have to go ahead and put our hands there and push from inferior to superior to get that to go. And you were at the same conference when we first heard this presentation of this particular study by the people who did the research.
Yeah. Already
before them had just been teaching the wrong way to do it. He was, I remember it was David. He's like, I just taught you something that's already obsolete. But what happens if you are doing that? Let's say it takes 400 newtons to get an adjustment, and you're putting 400 newtons in, but you're doing I to S. What happens to all that power?
So that's the fun part. In the force sensing lab, I think everybody knows at this point Parker has amazing technology.
You have to elaborate on that.
We have the force sensing technology lab, and the table will measure all forces that get to the table in all three dimensions. So if you all remember your orthogonals, the XYZ forces are all picked up by the table. So when Dr. Morgan, when you talked about this study in your presentation at Parker seminars, I was challenging people, and I made him nervous. I was challenging people when they came through the lab to say, hey, let's test this out. Let's see what we can find. And there is friction between the table and the mannequin that we use. But I would intentionally push I to S as hard as I could on this mannequin and then still come in with that P to A force. And when you look at what shows up on the screen, you get an X, a Y, and a Z force. And you see how much went left to right, how much went superior, inferior, how much went P to A. And every single time, the bulk of the force goes P to A. It doesn't matter if I try to go I to S, if I try to go S to I, the bulk of the force. Some goes P to I to S, but not all.
So we say
So
P to A, are you saying perpendicular to the spine?
Oh, good point of clarification. It goes straight down.
Got it.
Yeah.
No matter if I push up, if I push down, if I twist, the force
90
goes
degrees.
down.
Goes down.
So why not do a 90-degree
So I think
adjustment?
that's what people are taking from this. Why should we go straight P to A? My interpretation of it is from a patient comfort standpoint, maybe not, because I think part of the tissue pull and thinking of the curve of the spine is for patient comfort. You might want a little bit of that I to S tissue pull to get the skin out of the way, to get the muscles, all the things underneath between the joint out of the way so you can get a good contact. But when you actually go to impulse, focus on taking that tissue pull into that P to A direction, the 90-degree direction, because the bulk of your force is going to move the joint that way anyways.
Wow.
That's how I interpret it.
So how I look at it too is if it takes 400 newtons to get a P to A adjustment, and I'm putting an I to S component to it, I'm going to bleed some power.
Yeah.
And I might need to use more force than is necessary.
That too.
And you possibly could break a rib. Like if instead of putting 400 newtons straight down, if I take 800 newtons, that might be too much force. I might cause joint damage or injury.
You could, absolutely. You could overestimate your force. A lot of people don't actually know how strong they are or are not.
But your lab shows them. It's pretty amazing to watch students come in and really basically calibrate themselves and having that motor memory. What have you experienced in that lab?
Yeah, so we actually will break it down. We have different parameters, and they'll say, here's how much preload you have, or how much did you push in before you add the impulse. We have how much force did you apply and how fast did you do your adjustment. So let's say that you like a really firm adjustment because you're like, yeah, you got to really get my thoracic spine. I need 800 newtons. Well, it's my job to coach the student to be able to get that force output in a manner that they won't hurt themselves and that they have a good understanding of how to do that. But if I'm like, oh, I don't really want an 800 Newton adjustment, I want like 400 Newtons, which it's not actually true for me. You need to, my spine needs to move. But if someone needs a more gentle adjustment, then they also need to learn, how do I pull this back? And so my favorite thing in that lab, aside from watching students grow really quickly in their development, is when they come over from the clinic and they say, Doc, I've got this patient, and this patient, I cannot adjust them for whatever reason. And I say, all right, in your mind, put your patient on the table. This mannequin is now your patient. And close your eyes, picture your patient. Show me what you did. And we turn on the computer and we get the data and they do their adjustment. And then we take a look at what happened and what their goal is. And every single time this has happened, the student, we work through it, they figure out what to change, they go back to clinic, see their patient, and every time they're like, it worked, I figured it out, I was able to help that person. Like, it is amazing how fast they're learning. The days of working on old tires, you don't have to anymore.
That's fantastic. So the big concept here is if you're doing different angles, you're going to lose the power down.
You could,
If you put a total 400 newtons here, and if you're going anterior, you only get like a 137 newton.
I think that's what that study found. Yeah.
Yeah, they only down instead of 400, you get 137. So that's that's not anywhere near. That means you're gonna have to push a lot more than 400 newtons to transmit 400 newtons perpendicular to the spine.
You would, yeah.
So we should probably be over the patient directly when you're doing the thoracic adjustments. What would you recommend?
I really hesitate behind any like absolutes or all the times because it's always dependent on the patient on the table.
It's always dependent. Okay, got it.
Right? But I would say that if we understand that the bulk of our force is going P to A, we should probably be more cognizant of our position in that when we get there and what we're doing in that position. Maybe we can get there and use less than we think because we're in a better position. Maybe we get there and, I think being open and aware will help clinicians fine-tune their hands.
And yeah, there's different positions. You put the table on, drop the thoracic piece away. There's tricks that I've picked up over the years that seem the things I give a lighter adjustment if I position the table for a particular reason. So this is a data point. This is information. It's not all the information. I think we can say that the frictionless interface, what's important about that is we're not going to be able to torque things. And the next study we're going to talk about is going to talk a little bit more about directional force. So we might want to be more over them. That's how I look at it. But also to get 400 newtons of directional force into a spine, it's better to do it perpendicular to the spine. if practical.
If that's your goal.
If that's your goal.
Yep.
So something else we can look at is another study, and this one was done by Greg Glauchuk and Stephen Pearl, and it was done with porcine spines.
Yeah.
Are you familiar with this study?
I am.
What's the title of this study?
The relation between the application angle of spinal manipulative therapy and resultant vertebral accelerations in situ porcine model.
Wow, another mouthful. But through this whole study, this next illustration that's in the study kind of shows the crux of it.
Yep.
They found that it didn't matter which direction you adjusted, the force was always directed perpendicular to the spine.
And I may have jumped ahead in explaining that earlier, sorry. But we found the exact same thing in the lab when we tried, the same thing with our mannequins.
So you do this when you bring students in, you show them that it doesn't matter if you push this way or that way, the spine directs the force perpendicular the thrust eventually goes perpendicular to the spine.
The bulk of the force is going perpendicular, yep.
So if you're going I to S, it still goes perpendicular. If you're going S to I, it goes perpendicular. Doesn't matter, so why not just go perpendicular?
Yeah.
So again, I think this is what they said here. The results from this study suggest that spinal manipulative therapy applied at non-normal angles, whatever that means, does not increase vertebral accelerations in that same direction, but acts to reduce the transmitted force. So basically, by going to other angles besides perpendicular, you're actually bleeding power.
Yeah, there's some faculty that look at it as energy leaks. Mm-hmm. So you're going to set up on your patient and you're using all this effort to get to a certain position, but when you actually go to adjust, you're not really using your energy efficiently. And so we could be more effective as practitioners understanding that if the bulk of the force is going perpendicular, well, let's make the effort into focusing there.
And one of the
keeping
things
the patient comfortable.
Well, a couple of things is we want to do is reduce the amount of force that a small person has to use to adjust, makes you more effective. Reduce the force that a big person would use that could hurt somebody, and also make it more comfortable and more beneficial to the patient.
We don't have to work harder if we don't have to work harder, right? Work smarter?
Yep,
Is that
exactly. So what would you say the take-home messages are from these two studies that we looked at?
These two studies, the way I interpret them is that you have a lot more flexibility as a practitioner to approach your patient and to understand that if I can get my body in this position to get a P to A or a perpendicular thrust into this, especially for thoracics, into the spine, it gives you more option. It kind of takes away some of the rules or the constraints that you might have in your brain of other things that may not be as effective as you thought they were in the first place.
I agree. That was great. So this has been an interesting look into adjusting just the frictionless interface and the direction that we transmit force with thoracic adjustments. And as we said, it's a data point. There's still more studies that need to be done.
Yeah.
But for this, and with the force plate adjusting technology, which confirms this, it's a good starting point.
It's fun to come play in that lab and to see it all. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. You've been listening to Dr. Dana Hollingsworth, and this is Clinical Rounds.
Thanks for watching another episode of Parker Success Academy Clinical Rounds with Dr. William E. Morgan.